Hello again, this is Jeff Scott at Blackhawk Technical College, and I'm coming at you right now with what I hope will be the last lecture for Chapter 7 for our 152-153 iOS or Swift class for the spring 2015 semester. I've been able to fix a lot of my errors, and I found out there was one little thing that wasn't that little that I was forgetting to do. On the bottom of page 222, the author said to bring up the connections inspector, and it says with the picker view highlighted, make sure the data source and delegate, make sure that you drag from data source and delegate, all right, and make sure, that you drag in there to the top of the scene in the storyboard. In other words, what I was not doing, now I've got the emulator running, so it's going to run a little slower. I wanted to show you that I did fix the problem that I was having, and it now seems to be working just fine. Close that. I want to bring up, it doesn't matter which one I bring up, this one is fine. All right. So what the author was saying, what you had to do was go into the connections inspector. I don't need that open right now for this. All right, so find the connections inspector. And there are, the way this looks right now, I've already done it, but originally these dots were not highlighted. So I had to hold down on the dot, control click, and drag over to here for both the data source and for the delegate so that it recognizes it. So what ends up happening, here's my date picker, which always has been working. All right. Here's the people in my family, which is working. Here is the one that wasn't working. So for instance, if I come through here and say I want tuna salad on rye, see, I get that. And then finally, this is a little out of order, and I'm sorry for that. Now I can pick a state. Pick Florida, let's pick Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, there you go. And if I pick that, you notice that that works also. All right. Now, that's the good news. The bad news, if you'd call it that, is the last one that we're supposed to do, which is this slot machine right here. All right. I did it, and I put in the code that was at the beginning of the chapter, got to about 2 or 3 pages before the end of the chapter, and everything worked fine. Okay, I didn't have sound as the author did, but for whatever reason, but everything else worked fine. Then I put in the stuff at the end of the chapter, and now when I open it up, I get a fatal error, unexpectedly found nil while wrapping an optional value. And it's coming up in here, but as far as I can tell, I've got the exact same thing the author has. In fact, I even went back and removed my code, tried putting in the author's code, and there was no difference. So, what I'm going to do is go over the rest of the chapter, show you what I did, and then attempt to remove that code that I put in at the end, or I should say comment it out, put in the other code, and then hopefully run it again and see where we are at that time. I've already put the code in here, so I'm now up to page 237. All right, and on 237, halfway down on the page, it was creating a simple game with a custom picker. So I did this. All right. I mean, I can show you all the code when we get in there, but I went into the custom picker, viewcontroller.swift. In fact, I guess I can show that to you now. Oops, not there. And the first thing the author says is to come up here and put in your UI picker view delegate and the UI picker view data source. Now when you put these in, you're going to get an error message until you actually write the associated code, which is down at the very bottom. So we'll look at that in just a minute. All right, the next thing we're supposed to do is we're supposed to add a property right here in line 15 for an array that's going to hold all the images that we want to use. Okay? All right. And they mention on the bottom of page 237, the author says, even though the picker looks a bit fancier, there's actually very little difference in the way that we build the interface. All the extra work is done with the delegate methods in the controller. So the author says to make sure you save the source code, go in, and on page 238, he tells you how to go in there and build the actual interface. All right, so again, I've already done that. Let me stop the run here. There's no reason to keep this running. So if we come back up to the main storyboard here and we take a look at the custom, which is the one we want. Okay, that's the one right here. That's what we're told to build. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this stuff that's on 238, but the author says to come in there, set up all of your sizes for the label, do the alignment, etc. So all that stuff is on the top part of page 238. Then he talks a little bit about fonts on the rest of the page, but then he gets into implementing the view controller, and that's what I want to talk about here. So the first thing we're supposed to do is go in and, as always, like I showed you before, go into here and then go into the connections inspector, control drag from the dot that's right here over to the yellow thing right here, which represents the view controller. Do that both for the data source and for the data delegate. So I've done both those. All right. Trying to show you the code here. So that was the first thing to do. Then the next thing to do, so that's set that up, you know, and then control drag down to here from the picker view, and that gave us this. I called it custom picker. The author called it picker, but I don't know why that would make any difference. Then we were supposed to go down and control drag from here to here, and that was going to be our label, which he just called win label. And then also do two things with the button. First, control click up here to set up an outlet for the button, called button. That's what he called it. And then also control click and down here and do an IB action. All right, where we've got our func. Now that I look at that, I've got a func show button. Nope, that's something different. That's a little bit later. I'm sorry. That's code that we had later. There it is. There's our IB action. So I put all the code in there that's shown on page 239 in the book. Okay, they do ask you to make a couple changes to it later, but I'll just, for now at least, we'll leave that the way that it is. In fact, let's look at it here. We've got a Boolean variable that's called win. So we use win to keep track of whether or not we found a 3 in a row. Number of row shows us how many of the same value we have in a row so far. Well, we have nothing to compare it to, so we set it equal to -1. Same thing with last val, which keeps track of the previous component's value in last val. Since we don't have anything we set those both to -1. Next, we loop through all 5 of our components, so in other words, all 5 of those things that we want to have twirling around. And you notice that we use one of the special for loops, going from 0 to 4, and we get a count from the images array. And what ends up happening here is we end up getting a random image put in locations 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. Then we come in and we compare the new value with the previous value to see whether or not this is what we're doing in here is we're checking to see whether or not we've got 3 in a row. Next, after that, as you can see right here, and I'm on about line 73, we set the corresponding component to the new value, telling it to animate the change, and we tell the picker to reload the component. Finally, we go in and we check, and if number in the row is greater than or equal to 3, then we want to come in and set win equal to true. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and set this the way that it was set up originally and comment out the later code that we put in to see if I can get this to work so you can actually see it in action, so to speak. So, in our spin, we've got this, this, this. Good, good, good. Good, 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 good. All right, so this was the new stuff right here. This is where someplace in here it's, whoops, someplace in here under the crunch sound, and that's the sound stuff. It's blowing up, and I'm not getting sound anyway. So I'm just going to grab, for now, all of the stuff that you see right here, and I'm going to comment it out. And make it, whoops, and make it look the way that it looked originally. So after the win equal true, all right, then the next line that we had in there underneath our for loop would have just been win, whoops, see, win label dot text equals win, and we use the ternary operator here. And what this says is if we won, if win is true, we set the text to winner, otherwise we set it to nothing and actually a blank space. So I'm going to hold off on this stuff for right now. And actually, that needs to be down a line lower than it was. Okay. Next, we're told to go down to the viewDidLoad function that you see down here. And we're told to insert the following code. Well, what's that doing? Well, that's throwing those images, and it's making those images available to us. The number 7, the bar, the crown, the cherry, the apple, and the lemon. All right? And when we get done with that, we're supposed to send winLabel.text equal to nothing, which you comment out later, but I'm going to put it back in now. Okay? So I'm following the code as shown on page 239. Now we're moving up to page 240. Then at the very bottom, we're told to go down and set up a bunch of delegates. It's all the stuff that you see down here. All right? So, number of components in picker view is going to return an integer and returns 5, which is the number total of things that we have in the row. All right? The picker view here, the number of rows in the component, we return the images.count. The next one that's here, so those are our data source and these are our delegates here. Let image equal images row, let image, yeah, boom, boom. As far as I know, this stuff was okay. I looked at it at least once. If you look at it and see something that looks funky on it, please let me know. And then here's the last one. All right, so I explained the spin method to you already, and I explained the viewMethod.load, which gets us all the way up to page 242. So the author says, save it, take it for a spin. So I'm going to do a file save. Now, it may still blow up, but again, I wasn't taping this. I was working on this at home, and I had people in the house, my kids, so it wasn't quiet at all in the house. So what I ended up doing was just writing in the code with the idea that I talk about it afterwards. Okay, so that succeeded. So where I started to fall apart, so to speak, with these final details that started on the middle of page 242. So I'll show those to you in a minute, but what I want to see is if I put this stuff back, if it works now. All right, but again, I've commented stuff in and commented stuff out, and I've done so much of it that it's a little bit funkied up, for lack of better words. Okay? So I hope this comes up in just a second. again, you do have the working copy, which is from the author, and now out of the 5 components that are in here, I've got the first component, the second component, the third component, the fourth component are working. And let's see with the 5th one now what this does. There, you can see it spins. Probably have to play it a long time because it sure didn't seem like it took a long time for me to win when I played it last time, but I want you to see that it does say winner, if I ever do win. It does look like it's fairly random though. There we go. Now the author told you to come up with a nicer color, etc. I didn't do any of that stuff. Right, I didn't really care, to be honest with you, one way or the other. All right, I'm going to stop the simulator, and I'm also going to take this and minimize that. So that gets us to the middle of page 242. There's like 204. The chapter ends on like page 246. So again, this is where it got weird, but I'll go over it with you anyway. Even though when I put that stuff in, I ran into nothing but problems. So this is where under the final details, the author said the game is fun, but it's so darn quiet. Now there might be something in here, maybe I didn't read this well enough because I never really got my sound working. Alright, it tells us we've won before the dials finish spinning, which is a minor thing, but I don't like, the author doesn't like that. So the author said, come in there, and said the book contains 2 sound files, crunch.wave and win.wave. Now that's probably part of the problem. I never dragged those into my pickers folder. Alright, so let's take a look at those. Okay. Boy. So we'll bring this back up. Oops. Bring up the wrong one. Okay, so there that is. And what I want to change this to here is there's picker sounds. And there's crunch. We're supposed to drag that up to here. It should ask me if I want to copy it in, which I do. Finish. And if I do that again, so there's crunch.wave. And then I'll do the same thing with win.wave. Again, copy it in. Alright, so those are both in there now. Alright, it says drag both of these files to your project's pickers folder. They are the sounds will play when the users tap the spin and when they win, respectively. To work with sounds, you'll need to access the iOS Audio Toolbox classes. So insert the following line in bold just above the existing import line. Alright, so in other words, put it right under the UI kit. And I did that. So there's the audio toolbox. The caseness looked correct, the spelling looked correct as far as I could see. Okay. All right. Next is when the author had actually came in and told you to set up a regular outlet for the button. And that's the one that I set up right here on line 21. You can see my stuff is wired correctly. There's the picker, there's the label, and there's the button. So that looks okay. It says after you type that and save the file, click main.storyboard to edit the GUI. Once it's open, control drag from the custom icon just below the view scene to the spin button. Alright. and connect it to the new outlet we just created. Custom icon. I don't know if I did that or not. So they tell you to come in here and go into the document outline and find the custom, right? And control drag from the custom icon to the spin button. I don't know if I did that or not either. All right. Save the storyboard. Okay. Then they say next we need to do a few things in the implementation of our controller class. First, we need some instance variables. It says open up custom picker.swift, which I have right here, and under all those IB outlets, add these two lines that you see here in line 23 and 24. They will hold references to the loaded sounds. So I've got private var win sound, colon, system sound equals 0. Private var crunch sound ID, colon, system sound ID equals 0. So those are both in correctly. Then we're told to put in the show button. And you can see that that's in there. Button.hidden equal false is shown on the bottom of 243. Then we've got our win sound. And like I said, this is where it's appeared at least to start, for lack of better words, going to hell. So let's double click or double check that. I'm on the bottom of page 243. If win sound equals 0, let sound equal ns bundle, main bundle. It's a lot of code there. Win with extension wave. All right, so basically what we're saying is we want to have the winning sound if we win. Okay. And again, I've checked that code. It appears to be okay as far as I can tell. That gets us to 244. So the first method, as mentioned there on the top of 244, the first one that we have up here, the show button is used to show the button. We're going to hide the button when the user taps it because the wheels are already spinning, so there's no point in letting them spin again until it's stopped. All right. It says the second method will be called when the user wins. That's this one. It's the play win sound. First we check if we've already loaded the winning sound. Properties are initialized as 0 and valid identifiers for loaded sounds are not 0, so we can check to see whether or not it's loaded by comparing that identifier to 0. All right. To load a sound, we ask the main bundle for the path to the sound in win.wave, just as we did when we loaded the property list in the dependent picker view. Once we have the path, the next 3 lines of code play it, then we set the label to winner. We call the show button method. However, we call the show button method in a special way using the function that's called dispatch after. The author mentions in the second paragraph on the top of 244 that this is a handy function that lets you run code sometime into the future, in this case 1.5 seconds into the future, which gives the dials time to spin. The function is part of a group of useful functions referred to as the Grand Central Dispatch, or GCD, which we go into in Chapter 15. Then we're told to make the following changes to the spin method. Now the stuff that they show on the rest of 244, there are no changes in there. They're just showing the entire method, so that's all the same as far as I can tell. When equal false, numRow, last value both equal -1. There's our for loop. Let value equal arg4. If numRow, else numRow, last value. So all that stuff is not new on the bottom of 244, which gives us just the top of 245, or all of 245, and then the top of 246. So we've got our picker in here. That's still the same. All right. And then they've got this line that was in here before, win equal true. So now this win label, now that gets taken out. And now I can take the stuff before that I commented out and remove the comments. And we'll take a quick look at that stuff. Okay. So this is all the code that's in the very middle of page 245. First is said we load the crunch sound if needed, just as we did with the win sound before. So let me double check that code, but I've checked it several times. I didn't see anything wrong with it. Now play the crunch sound to let the player know the wheels have been spun. Next, instead of setting the label to winner, we do something what the author says is tricky. We call one of two methods that we just created. But we do it after a delay using the dispatch after. If the user won, we call our play win sound a half a second in the future, which gives time for the dials to spin into place. Otherwise, we just wait a half a second and re-enable the spin button. Okay? So, unless I've missed something, and like I said, I don't think I have, it says now you're done. Hit the Xcode run button and click the final tab to hear the slot machine in action. Alright, so maybe I will have sound now, I don't know. And if that was the problem before, well then it's silly me. And then on the top of page 246, the author says, by now you should be comfortable with tab bar apps and pickers. In this chapter, we built a full-fledged tab bar app containing 5 different content views from scratch. You'll learn how to use pickers in a number of different configurations, how to create pickers with multiple components, even how to make the values in one component dependent on the value selected in another component. You also saw how to make the picker display images rather than text. Along the way, we talked about picker delegates and picker data sources. It's a long chapter, they say, so in the next chapter we'll go into table views. And I hope to start on that. Today is Thursday, and I hope to start on that tomorrow. So let's go back to this last one. See if we get sound, first of all. No sound. But it's working. So I don't have sound, but with my changes in there, they're now working. And you notice, if you look in here after I click spin, you do not see the button. All right? See if we can win one. Wow. And you notice now the button was removed too. So it appears now to be working. So what I'm going to do is, I'm stopping my tape right now, but I'm going to grab this entire project and I'm going to put it out there on the system in all of its glory. That's in the right order, that's in the right order. These two are flip-flop because I kept rebuilding them, so the two should be there, and there's probably an easy way to move it, but it works, so I don't want to ding with it, and that's in the right order. Alright, so again, I have now finished Chapter 7, the Picker app. So I want to stop my run here. Now I want to go in. Quit Xcode. Okay. So again, in the next chapter that we have, it's a long chapter too. It's on table views. So as mentioned, I will be coming at you with that one, hopefully starting tomorrow, and I'd like to have that done by no later than the end of the weekend. All right, so I'll come back with that soon.